How did my birthday turn into a lesson about who mattered, and how did it end with everyone suddenly silent? What started as a joint celebration ended with my name erased, my place downgraded, and my son-in-law honored like a king. They thought I would swallow it. They were wrong. Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. The invitation came 3 weeks before my 58th birthday. I found it on my kitchen counter, tucked between the electric bill and a flyer for gutter cleaning. Heavy cardstock, cream-colored, embossed lettering. The kind of paper Marissa only used when she wanted things to look expensive. I picked it up and read it slowly. Join us for an evening honoring Evan Caldwell's achievements and celebrating another year of success. I read it again. Then I checked the date printed at the bottom. April 14th, my birthday. There was a smaller line beneath the main text, squeezed in like it had been added as an afterthought. Troy's birthday included. Included. Not celebrated, not honored. Included. Like a side dish at a meal no one ordered. I set the invitation down on the counter and stared at it for a long time. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a lawnmower from somewhere down the street. Sunlight came through the window over the sink, warming the countertop and making the embossed letters shimmer. I could see my reflection in the dark screen of the microwave across from me. Graying hair that needed a trim, reading glasses hanging from a chain around my neck, the same faded blue polo shirt I'd worn yesterday to fix Mrs. Henderson's fence 3 houses down. 58 years old. I'd built a life on being steady, on being the kind of man people could rely on, the kind who showed up when you needed him and didn't make a fuss about it afterward. I'd worked construction for 20 years, then moved into project consulting when my knees started giving out. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that would impress anyone at a cocktail party. Just honest work that paid the bills and kept me useful. I'd raised Marissa on my own after her mother left when she was 6. I'd packed her lunches and braided her hair, badly at first, better with practice. I'd sat through every parent-teacher conference, every dance recital, every soccer game where she spent more time picking dandelions than chasing the ball. I'd paid for her college without taking out loans. 4 years at a state school, tuition and room and board, all of it covered. She'd graduated with a degree in marketing and no debt. When she'd wanted to buy her first car, I'd co-signed the loan and helped her negotiate the price down. When she'd gotten engaged to Evan Caldwell 3 years ago, I'd written a check for the wedding that cleared out half my savings account. I hadn't complained, she was happy, that was supposed to be enough. When they'd wanted to buy a house, something bigger, nicer, in a better neighborhood, I'd helped with the down payment, not a loan, a gift, because that's what fathers do. And now my birthday was included in an evening honoring my son-in-law. I picked up my phone and opened the text thread with Marissa. The last message was from 2 weeks ago. She'd sent a photo of a new lamp she'd bought for the living room and asked what I thought. I'd replied with a thumbs-up emoji. I typed, "Got the invitation? Looks nice." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Thanks, Dad. We're so excited. Evan's been working so hard this year, and we really wanted to do something special to celebrate everything he's accomplished." I stared at the message, waited to see if anything else would come. Some acknowledgement that April 14th had been my birthday for 58 years before Evan Caldwell had ever entered our lives. Nothing, I typed. "Looking forward to it." She sent back a heart emoji, and then, "Love you." I set the phone down and walked to the living room. The house felt too big sometimes. 3 bedrooms for one person. I'd thought about downsizing after Marissa moved out, but I'd never gotten around to it. This was the house where she'd grown up, where I'd measured her height against the door frame every year on her birthday, where she'd practiced her prom makeup at the bathroom mirror, where she'd cried when her high school boyfriend broke up with her and I'd sat on the other side of her bedroom door, not knowing what to say but staying close anyway. I sat down on the couch and looked at the bookshelf across the room. Photos in mismatched frames. Marissa at 6, missing her front teeth. Marissa at 12, holding a soccer trophy. Marissa at 18, in her graduation cap and gown. Marissa at 27, in her wedding dress, standing next to Evan. There were no photos of me. I'd always been the one taking the pictures. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The invitation was still on the kitchen counter. I could see it in my mind, the way my name had been squeezed into the bottom like an afterthought. Troy's birthday included. I stayed on the couch for a long time, listening to the silence of the house. The next 2 weeks passed in a kind of slow motion. I went to work. I answered emails. I reviewed contracts for the small consulting firm that kept me on retainer. I fixed Mrs. Henderson's fence and replaced a broken step on Mr. Yamamoto's deck. Marissa called twice. The first time was on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the garage, organizing tools, when my phone rang. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, sweetheart. Just wanted to check in. You got the invitation, right?" "I did." "Good. So you're coming?" "I said I would." "I know. I just wanted to make sure. Everyone's going to be there. Evan's whole family, his colleagues from work, some of our friends. It's going to be a really nice night." "Sounds like it." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "Dad, are you okay?" "I'm fine." "You sound weird." "Just tired. Long day." "Okay. Well, get some rest. And Dad, wear something nice, okay? Not the khakis you wore to Aunt Patty's funeral. Something that looks good in photos." I looked down at the jeans and work shirt I was wearing, paint-stained and frayed at the edges. "I'll find something," I said. "Great. Love you." "Love you too." She hung up. I set the phone on the workbench and stared at the wall. The garage smelled like motor oil and sawdust. There were tools hanging from pegboard hooks, wrenches and hammers and screwdrivers, all organized by size and function. I'd built this system 20 years ago and maintained it ever since, everything in its place. I wondered when I'd stopped having a place in Marissa's life. The second call came on a Thursday evening. I was making dinner, chicken and rice, nothing fancy, when the phone buzzed. "Hey, Dad, quick question." "Go ahead." "So Evan's dad is flying in for the party, and he's bringing this really expensive wine from his personal collection. Like really expensive. And I was thinking it would be nice if you brought something too. Not wine, Gareth's got that covered. But maybe you could pick up some beer? The good kind, not the cheap stuff. Evan's colleagues are kind of particular about that stuff." I turned off the stove. "You want me to bring beer?" I said. "Just for variety. You know, so there are options." "To my own birthday party." There was a pause. "It's not just your birthday, Dad. It's a celebration for Evan, too. He closed a huge deal this month, and his firm is recognizing him. This is a big moment for his career." I was quiet. "Dad, I'll bring beer," I said. "Thank you. You're the best." She hung up before I could say anything else. I stood in the kitchen, holding the phone, staring at the half-cooked chicken in the pan. Then I turned the stove back on and finished making dinner. I ate alone at the kitchen table, the same table where Marissa and I used to eat together every night when she was growing up. I'd taught her how to set the table properly. Fork on the left, knife and spoon on the right, napkin folded under the fork. She'd been so proud the first time she'd done it all by herself. I wondered if she remembered that. On the morning of April 14th, my 58th birthday, I woke up at 6. No cards in the mailbox, no calls, no texts. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, looking at the invitation I'd propped against the fruit bowl 2 weeks ago. The embossed letters caught the early morning light. "Join us for an evening honoring Evan Caldwell's achievements." I picked up my phone and scrolled through my messages. Nothing from Marissa, nothing from anyone. At 7:30, my phone buzzed. A text from my sister, Lena. "Happy birthday, little brother. Hope you're doing something fun today." I typed back, "Going to a party tonight." She replied immediately, "That's great. Who's throwing it?" I hesitated, then typed, "Marissa." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Well, have a good time. Call me this weekend." I put the phone down. At noon, Marissa texted, "Don't forget tonight, 7 o'clock, and don't forget the beer." No happy birthday, no acknowledgement of what day it was. I replied, "I'll be there." I spent the rest of the afternoon in the garage. I had a bookshelf that needed sanding, and I worked on it slowly, methodically, letting the repetitive motion settle my thoughts. The smell of sawdust filled the air. My hands moved automatically, guided by decades of muscle memory. When I was younger, I'd thought about opening my own carpentry shop. I was good with my hands. I liked the precision of it, the way raw materials could become something useful and beautiful if you took the time to do it right. But then Marissa's mother had left, and I'd needed steady income with health insurance, so I'd stayed in construction and later consulting. I'd put my own dreams on hold so I could give Marissa the stability she needed. I wondered if she knew that. At 5:30, I went inside and showered. I stood under the hot water for a long time, watching it circle the drain. When I finally got out, I dried off and went to my closet. I found a button-down shirt that wasn't too wrinkled and a pair of dark slacks. Not fancy, but clean. Presentable. The kind of outfit that wouldn't embarrass anyone in photos. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. 58 years old, gray hair, lines around my eyes, the face of a man who'd worked hard and asked for very little in return. I wondered if that had been a mistake. At 6:30, I loaded a case of craft beer into the trunk of my car. 24 bottles of some local brewery's IPA that the guy at the liquor store had recommended. $40. I'd spent $40 on beer for my own birthday party. I got in the car and sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine. I could stay home. I could text Marissa and tell her I wasn't feeling well. She'd be disappointed, but she'd get over it. The party would go on without me. Evan would still be celebrated. Gareth would still bring his expensive wine. The colleagues would still drink and laugh and network. No one would really miss me. But I started the engine anyway. I arrived at Marissa and Evan's house at 6:55. The driveway was already packed with cars. Luxury sedans, mostly. A black Mercedes, a silver BMW, a sleek Audi that probably cost more than I made in a year. I parked my 10-year-old Camry at the curb and sat there for a moment, looking at the house. It was a beautiful house. 2 stories, brick exterior, professionally landscaped yard. I'd helped them buy it. The down payment had come from a trust I'd set up when Marissa was born, a trust I'd contributed to every month for 30 years, even when money was tight. But my name wasn't on the deed. I got out of the car and grabbed the case of beer from the trunk. It was heavier than I'd expected. I carried it up the walkway, past the flower beds I'd helped plant 2 summers ago, and up the front steps I'd repaired last fall when one of them had started to crack. The front door was unlocked. I could hear music and voices inside. I pushed the door open and stepped into the entryway. The house was full of people, 30, maybe 40 of them, all dressed in cocktail attire. Women in dresses and heels, men in suits and ties. Everyone holding wine glasses or champagne flutes clustered in groups, talking and laughing. No one looked up when I walked in. I stood there for a moment, holding the case of beer, feeling invisible. Then I saw Marissa. She was in the living room, wearing a navy blue dress I'd never seen before. Her hair was styled in soft waves, and she was wearing makeup that made her look older, more sophisticated. She was talking to a tall woman in a red dress, both of them laughing at something. I walked toward her. "Marissa." She turned, and her face lit up. "Dad, you made it." She hugged me quickly, the kind of hug you give someone when other people are watching. Brief, performative. "Happy birthday," I said quietly. "Thanks." She pulled back and looked at the case of beer in my arms. "Oh, good. You brought it. Just set it in the kitchen. Evan's in there." "Okay." She was already turning back to the woman in the red dress. "Sorry, this is my dad. Dad, this is Christine. She works with Evan." Christine gave me a polite smile. "Nice to meet you." "You too," I said. But they were already talking again, picking up their conversation where they'd left off. I stood there for another moment, then carried the beer toward the kitchen. The kitchen was just as crowded as the living room. I recognized a few faces, neighbors, some of Marissa's college friends, but most were strangers. I set the case of beer on the counter next to 3 bottles of wine that looked like they cost more than my monthly utility bill. Evan was standing near the refrigerator, holding court with a group of men in expensive suits. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with perfectly styled hair and a smile that showed too many teeth. He saw me and raised his glass. "Troy, there he is." Everyone turned to look at me. I nodded. "Evan." He crossed the kitchen and clapped me on the shoulder. "Glad you could make it, buddy. Did you bring the beer?" "It's on the counter." "Perfect. Thanks for that." He turned to the men he'd been talking to. "This is Troy, Marissa's dad. Troy, these are some of the guys from the firm. Jeffrey, Callum, Wilder." They shook my hand one by one, their grips firm and brief. "Troy does consulting work," Evan said. "Small-scale project management stuff. Nothing too exciting, but it keeps him busy." One of the men, Jeffrey, I think, smiled. "We all start somewhere." Laughter. I felt my jaw tighten. Evan was already turning back to his conversation. Anyway, like I was saying, the Hartman deal almost fell through in the final hour, but I managed to pull it back. That's the thing about negotiation. You have to be willing to walk away. The men nodded, impressed. I stood there for another moment, then walked back toward the living room. I found a spot near the wall, between a bookshelf and a potted plant, where I could see most of the room without being in the way. I watched people talk and laugh and drink. I watched Marissa move through the crowd, smiling and gracious, the perfect hostess. No one wished me a happy birthday. At 7:30, someone turned the music down. The crowd started moving toward the dining room. I followed, staying near the back. The dining room had been transformed. The table I'd helped them move in 2 years ago was covered in a white cloth and laden with trays of food. Catered, obviously. Expensive-looking appetizers arranged in neat rows, shrimp and bruschetta and things I didn't recognize. At the head of the table sat Gareth Caldwell. He was 62, silver-haired, with the kind of tan you only get from spending too much time on golf courses. His suit was dark and perfectly tailored. He sat with his legs crossed, one arm draped over the back of his chair, looking like a man who was used to being the most important person in any room. Evan stood beside him, one hand on his father's shoulder. "Everyone," Evan said loudly, "I want to thank you all for being here tonight. It means the world to have so many incredible people in one place." Applause. Gareth smiled and raised his glass. "This year has been unbelievable," Evan continued, closing the Hartman deal, bringing in 3 new major clients, getting recognized by the regional board. Honestly, it's been beyond anything I could have imagined. More applause. But none of it would have been possible without the support of my family. He looked down at Gareth, my dad, who taught me everything I know about business, who showed me what real leadership looks like. Gareth nodded, his smile widening. And of course, my beautiful wife. Evan gestured toward Marissa, who was standing near the doorway. Marissa keeps me grounded. She's my rock. Marissa smiled, her cheeks flushing. And, Evan said, his tone shifting slightly, we're also celebrating another year for Troy. He looked around the room until he found me standing near the back. Troy's been around for quite a few of those years, he said, grinning. Laughter rippled through the room. My chest went tight. Evan raised his glass. To family, to success, to another great year ahead. Cheers! Glasses clinked. People drank. The music came back on, and then someone wheeled in the cake. It was massive. 3 tiers, covered in sleek black fondant with gold accents. There were sparklers on top, throwing bright, crackling light across the room, and in the center, written in bold gold lettering, Evan. The crowd gasped and applauded. Evan laughed, shaking his head. You guys are too much. Marissa was already taking photos, her phone held high, capturing every angle. I stared at the cake, at the sparklers, at my son-in-law's name written in gold, and then someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around. One of the catering staff was standing there holding a small plate. On it was a cupcake, store-bought, generic vanilla with a single candle stuck crookedly in the frosting, written across the top in shaky blue icing. Happy B-Day, Troy. For you, the woman said quietly. The room had gone quiet. People were watching. Evan grinned. Didn't forget about you, Troy. Laughter. Awkward, uncertain laughter. I looked at the cupcake, then at the 3-tier cake with my son-in-law's name blazing in gold. I looked at Marissa. She was smiling, but her eyes were uncertain, like she wasn't sure if this was funny or cruel. I took the plate from the catering woman. Thanks, I said. My voice sounded far away. I set the cupcake on the nearest surface, a side table by the window, and turned toward the door. Dad? Marissa called. I didn't stop. I walked through the dining room, through the living room, through the entryway. I walked past the laughter and the music and the clinking glasses. I walked out the front door and into the cool night air. Behind me, I could hear Marissa's voice calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove home. The streets were quiet. The radio was off. I drove in silence, my hands tight on the steering wheel, my chest aching with something I couldn't name. When I got home, I parked in the driveway and sat there for a long time. Then I went inside. The house was dark when I walked through the front door. I didn't turn on the lights. I just stood in the entryway, letting my eyes adjust to the shadows. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw 3 messages from Marissa. Dad, where did you go? Are you okay? Please call me. I put the phone on the hall table and walked to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the sink, looking out the window at the backyard. The grass needed mowing. I'd been putting it off for 2 weeks. I thought about the cupcake, about the way everyone had laughed. I thought about Evan's speech, about how he'd thanked his father and his wife and mentioned me like an afterthought. I thought about the invitation. Troy's birthday included. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. Instead, I went to the garage. The overhead light flickered when I turned it on, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. The air smelled like sawdust and motor oil and old paint. My tools hung neatly on the pegboard wall. The bookshelf I'd been sanding was still on the workbench, half finished. I sat down on an old wooden stool and looked around. This was where I'd spent most of my time since Marissa had moved out. Building things, fixing things, keeping my hands busy so my mind wouldn't wander too far. But tonight, my mind wouldn't stop. I thought about all the times I'd stepped back, all the times I'd let other people take center stage while I stayed in the background, quiet and unnoticed. This wasn't the first time. The thought settled over me slowly, like dust falling through still air. I remembered Christmas 3 years ago. Marissa had invited me over for dinner. I'd arrived with gifts, thoughtful, expensive gifts I'd spent weeks choosing. a cashmere scarf for Marissa, a leather portfolio for Evan, a bottle of aged scotch for Gareth. When I'd walked in, the living room had been full of Caldwells, Gareth's brother and his wife, Evan's two cousins, people I'd never met. The tree was enormous, nearly touching the ceiling, covered in white lights and gold ornaments. Marissa had hugged me and said, "Oh, Dad, you didn't have to bring anything?" But she'd barely looked at the gifts, because Gareth had brought a car, an actual car, a midnight blue Audi with a red bow on the hood, parked in the driveway like something out of a commercial. Everyone had rushed outside to see it. Evan had whooped and hugged his father. Marissa had taken 100 photos. Gareth had stood there, grinning, soaking in the admiration like sunlight. And my gifts had stayed under the tree, unopened, forgotten. When I'd left that night, they were still there. I'd told myself it didn't matter, that material things weren't important, that my presence was enough. But it had mattered. I remembered Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Marissa had asked me to bring the turkey. I'd brined it for 2 days, following a recipe I'd found online. I'd roasted it carefully, checking the temperature every 20 minutes. I'd carved it myself, arranging the slices on a platter I'd bought specifically for the occasion. When I'd arrived at their house, Gareth had already been sitting at the head of the table I'd bought for Marissa and Evan when they'd first moved in. He'd made a toast before we ate, about family and gratitude and the importance of strong leadership. Everyone had raised their glasses and murmured agreement. No one had mentioned the turkey. No one had thanked me. I'd sat at the far end of the table, near the kitchen, while Gareth held court and told stories about his business deals and his international trips. I remembered Marissa's 30th birthday. I'd offered to host the party at my house. I'd suggested a backyard barbecue, something casual and fun. She'd said no. Evan wanted to do something special. They'd rented a yacht. A yacht. I hadn't been invited to help plan it. I'd found out about the details the same way everyone else had, through a group text. When I'd shown up, I'd been seated with the catering staff. Evan had introduced me to his colleagues as Marissa's father, in the same tone you'd use to say, the guy who mows the lawn. I remembered smaller moments, too, being asked to step out of family photos because Gareth wanted just the core family. Being told my investment advice was appreciated but not needed, being called old school when I'd suggested a different approach to something, and every time I'd told myself it was fine, that I was being sensitive, that keeping the peace was more important than my pride. But I'd been wrong. I'd taught them that I didn't matter. I'd trained them to overlook me. And now, sitting in my garage on my 58th birthday, I realized that I'd been complicit in my own erasure. I stayed in the garage until midnight, then I went inside, poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey, and sat at the kitchen table. My phone was still on the hall table. I could see the screen lighting up every few minutes with new messages. I didn't check them. Instead, I opened my laptop. I pulled up my financial records and started going through them methodically. Bank statements, investment accounts, trust documents, old contracts, and receipts. I found the paperwork for Marissa's college fund. I'd opened it the month she was born and contributed to it every month for 18 years. When she'd graduated, the balance had been just over $120,000. I found the records for the down payment on Marissa and Evan's house, $75,000, transferred directly from the trust I'd established in Marissa's name. I found the loan documents for Evan's business expansion, $250,000. My name was listed as the cosigner. The bank had required someone with proven financial stability and a strong credit history. Gareth's name was nowhere on it. I found receipts for Marissa's car, $32,000, paid in full. I found records of smaller things, too, birthday gifts, holiday dinners, emergency car repairs, medical bills when Marissa had broken her wrist in college and her insurance hadn't covered everything. I added it all up. Over the past 30 years, I'd contributed more than $500,000 to Marissa's life, quietly, without fanfare, without asking for recognition, and somewhere along the way, that generosity had been forgotten. Or worse, it had been attributed to someone else. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the spreadsheet on my screen. Gareth Caldwell was wealthy. I didn't doubt that. He had money from his family's business, investments that had paid off, real estate holdings that had appreciated over the decades. But he hadn't paid for Marissa's education. He hadn't helped with the house. He hadn't co-signed the business loan. I had. And no one knew, because I'd never told them. I'd thought that quiet support was noble, that love meant stepping back and letting other people shine, but silence wasn't the same as respect, and generosity without acknowledgement was just invisibility. I closed the laptop and finished my whiskey, then I went to bed. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to shout, I wasn't going to confront anyone, and I wasn't going to demand apologies or explanations. I was going to do something quieter, something methodical. I was going to let them see exactly what they'd been taking for granted. The next morning, I woke up at 6. My phone was still on the hall table where I'd left it. I walked past it without looking and went straight to the kitchen to make coffee. While the coffee brewed, I opened my laptop again and started making notes. I needed a plan. Not an angry one, not a vengeful one. Just a clear, strategic plan that would force everyone to see the truth. I thought about the family dynamics, about the way Gareth had positioned himself as the patriarch, about the way Evan soaked up praise like a sponge, about the way Marissa deferred to both of them, prioritizing their approval over everything else. They'd built a narrative, a story where Gareth was the wise, generous father figure and Evan was the self-made success story. And I was just there. Background noise. The quiet guy who showed up to family events and didn't cause problems. But narratives could be rewritten. I opened a new document and started typing. First, I needed to gather documentation. Everything I'd reviewed last night, bank statements, trust documents, loan agreements, needed to be organized and easily accessible. Second, I needed to understand the current situation. What assumptions were people making? What did Marissa believe about her own financial history? What did Evan think about the source of his success? Third, I needed leverage. A moment where the truth would have maximum impact. I spent 3 hours that morning creating a detailed timeline. Every major financial contribution I'd made. Every moment when I'd been sidelined or overlooked. Every time Gareth had been given credit for something I'd done. It was sobering to see it all laid out. By noon, I had a plan. At 1 o'clock, my phone finally ran out of battery and stopped buzzing. I plugged it in but didn't turn it on. Instead, I went to my filing cabinet and started pulling out folders. I had copies of everything. I'd always been meticulous about record keeping, but I wanted to make sure I had multiple backups. I scanned documents and saved them to cloud storage. I organized them by category and date. I created a master folder labeled simply Records. It took all afternoon. By evening, I was exhausted. But I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. On Tuesday morning, I finally turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, 4 voicemails. Most were from Marissa. I scrolled through the messages without reading them carefully. The tone shifted from concerned to frustrated to almost angry. "Dad, where are you? I'm really worried. Please call me. This is ridiculous. You're being childish. Evan says you embarrassed us by leaving like that." I set the phone down and stared at it for a long moment. Then I called Howard Finch. Howard had been my accountant for 15 years. He was quiet, methodical, and completely trustworthy. He'd helped me set up the trust for Marissa. He'd reviewed the loan documents when I'd co-signed for Evan's business. He knew every detail of my financial situation. He answered on the second ring. "Troy, I was wondering if I'd hear from you." "I need to schedule a meeting," I said. "Something discreet." There was a pause. "What kind of meeting?" "I need to review some documents, make sure everything is still in order, and I need your advice on something." "What kind of something?" I hesitated. "I need to know how to make financial records public without violating any privacy laws." Another pause, longer this time. "Troy," Howard said slowly, "what's going on?" "I'll explain when I see you. Can you meet this week?" "Thursday afternoon, 2 o'clock. There's a cafe downtown, quiet place, good for private conversations. You know the one on 5th Street?" "I know it." "See you then." He hung up. I set the phone down and went to the garage. I needed to finish the bookshelf. Marissa called again that afternoon. This time I answered. "Dad, finally, where have you been?" "I've been home." "Why didn't you answer your phone?" "I needed some time to think." There was a pause. "About what happened at the party?" "Among other things." "Dad, I'm sorry if you felt left out. That wasn't our intention. We were just trying to celebrate Evan's achievements." "On my birthday?" "It was both. We were celebrating both of you." I didn't respond. "Dad?" "Marissa, did you know how much the down payment on your house was?" She hesitated. I think it was around $75,000. Evan's dad helped us with some of it." "Gareth didn't help with the down payment." "Yes, he did. He gave you advice. I gave you the money." Silence. "What are you talking about?" she said finally. "The $75,000 came from a trust I set up when you were born. I funded it for 30 years. When you bought the house, I transferred the money directly to your account." I didn't know that." "I know you didn't." More silence. Why are you bringing this up now? Because I'm tired of being invisible. You're not invisible, Dad. You're being dramatic. I closed my eyes. Marissa, when was the last time you thanked me for helping you? I thank you all the time. When? She didn't answer. I'll talk to you later, I said. I hung up before she could respond. The next day, I went to the bank. I met with my account manager, a woman named Patricia, who'd been handling my finances for a decade. I asked her to pull records for all major transactions over the past 10 years. Is there a problem, Mr. Renwick? She asked. No problem. I just want to make sure everything is documented properly. She printed out the records and put them in a folder. Is there anything else you need? Actually, yes. I need to update some beneficiary information. I spent an hour going through my accounts, making notes, confirming details. Everything was still in my name. Everything was still under my control. Good. Thursday afternoon, I met Howard at the cafe. It was a small place, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner, the kind of establishment that served overpriced coffee and undercooked pastries. But it was quiet, private. Howard was already there when I arrived, sitting in a back corner booth with a folder in front of him. I slid into the seat across from him. Troy. Howard. We ordered coffee. Neither of us touched it. And then Howard opened the folder. I pulled the documents you asked about. The trust, the loan agreement, the house payment records. Everything's here. He spread the papers across the table. I looked at them, my name on every single one. What are you planning to do with these? Howard asked. I leaned back. I'm not sure yet, but I want to be ready. Ready for what? For the truth to come out. Howard studied me. Troy, I've known you for a long time. You're not a vindictive person. What's really going on? I told him. About the birthday party, about the cupcake, about being erased from my own life. When I finished, Howard was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry, he said finally. That's hard. It is. But you need to be careful. If you go public with this information, it could damage your relationship with Marissa permanently. I know. Is that a risk you're willing to take? I thought about it. About Marissa calling me childish. About Evan's smirk when he'd handed me the cupcake. About Gareth sitting at the head of my table, accepting credit for things he'd never done. Yes, I said. It is. Howard nodded slowly. All right. Then let me help you do it right. We spent the next hour going through every document. Howard explained which ones could be shared publicly without violating privacy laws. He showed me how to create a clear, factual summary that wouldn't be emotional or accusatory, just truth. The key, he said, is to let the facts speak for themselves. Don't editorializing, don't explain, just present the information and let people draw their own conclusions. And when should I do this? Howard tapped his pen against the table. You need the right moment. A time when the maximum number of people will see it and when the context will make the truth impossible to ignore. I thought about that. And then I remembered something Evan had mentioned at the party. Something about an upcoming event. Howard, can you find out if Evan's firm is planning any public celebrations in the next few months? Howard pulled out his phone and typed for a moment. Then he looked up. There's an annual achievement gala in May. Caldwell and Lyons hosts it every year. Big event. Partners, clients, industry leaders. It looks like Evan is being honored this year. When in May? May 12th. I nodded slowly. That's perfect. Howard raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that's when everyone will be watching. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched and waited. The family group chat became active again. Evan posted photos from work events. Marissa shared pictures of a new restaurant they'd tried. Gareth commented on everything, his messages full of exclamation points and praise. That's my boy. Excellence recognizes excellence. No one mentioned my birthday. No one asked if I was okay. I didn't post anything. I just observed. On April 28th, Evan made an announcement. Big news, everyone. Caldwell and Lyons is hosting our annual Achievement Gala on May 12th, and I'm being honored for the Hartman deal and my contributions to the firm's growth this year. This is huge. All the major partners will be there, plus clients and industry leaders. I'd love for the whole family to join us. It's going to be an incredible night. Formal attire, invitations to follow. The responses came immediately. Gareth, so proud of you, son. This is what hard work looks like. Marissa, I'm so proud of you, baby. You deserve this. Various cousins and friends, congrats. Amazing. You earned it. I stared at the screen. Then I typed, Congratulations, Evan. Let me know the details. Marissa replied immediately. Thanks, Dad. I'll send you the invitation when it comes. That was it. No apology for the birthday party. No acknowledgement of our last conversation, just a casual expectation that I would show up and smile and applaud. I put the phone down and went back to my preparations. The formal invitation arrived a week later. It was even more elaborate than the birthday invitation. Heavy black cardstock with silver lettering, embossed logo of Caldwell and Lyons at the top. You are cordially invited to attend the Caldwell and Lyons Annual Achievement Gala, honoring outstanding contributions to the firm and the community. Below that, celebrating Evan Caldwell, Associate Partner. And at the very bottom, in small print, family and guests welcome. I set the invitation on my desk next to the folders Howard and I had prepared. Everything was falling into place. On May 3rd, 9 days before the gala, Marissa called. Hey, Dad, quick question about the gala. What is it? So the seating chart is a little complicated. They have this whole VIP section for partners and their families. Evan and I will be up front, obviously. Gareth, too. I waited. And we were trying to figure out where to put you. We thought maybe near the middle, with some of Evan's colleagues from the regional office. They're really nice, and we thought you'd feel more comfortable there than up front with all the business talk. You want to seat me away from the family table. It's not like that, Dad. It's just that the VIP section is really small, and there's a lot of protocol involved. We don't want you to feel uncomfortable. I see. You're okay with that, right? I was quiet for a long moment. Dad? I'll sit wherever you think is best, Marissa. She sighed with relief. Thank you. You're the best. Love you. She hung up. I set the phone down and stared at it. Then I opened my laptop and sent an email to Howard. May 12th. I'm going to need you there with the documents. His reply came within 5 minutes. Understood. The week before the gala, the group chat exploded with activity. Gareth posted photos of his new tuxedo. He'd had it custom made in New York. Evan posted a picture of the watch Gareth had bought him as a pre-celebration gift. A Rolex. $20,000, according to the caption. Marissa posted a photo of her gown. Emerald green silk, floor length, with a slit up one side. She looked beautiful. Can't wait to celebrate my incredible husband, the caption read. 37 people liked it. I didn't react to any of it, but I read every word. I watched Gareth position himself as the proud father. I watched Evan bask in the attention. I watched Marissa play the role of the supportive wife, and I watched them all forget completely that none of this would have been possible without me. On May 9th, 2 days before the gala, Marissa sent me a text. Dad, please remember to wear a suit, a nice one, and please don't tell any long stories if people ask about the family. Keep it short and positive. This is Evan's night, and we want everything to go smoothly. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, Understood. She sent a heart emoji. I deleted the thread and put the phone away. On the morning of May 10th, I drove downtown and picked up the suit I'd had tailored. Charcoal gray, fitted perfectly, expensive. I'd spent more on this suit than I'd spent on clothing in the past 5 years combined, but today mattered. At noon, I went to the bank. Patricia, my account manager, greeted me with her usual warmth. Mr. Renwick, what can I do for you today? I need certified copies of several transactions. She led me to her desk. Which transactions? I gave her the dates. The down payment transfer for Marissa's house, the loan guarantee for Evan's business, the car purchase, a few other major expenses. These are all being certified for legal purposes? She asked. Personal purposes. She looked at me curiously but didn't pry. 20 minutes later, I walked out with an envelope full of documents stamped with official bank seals. Everything was ready. That evening, I called Howard one last time. It's Troy. I figured. Are you getting cold feet? No, I just wanted to confirm the timing. 6:30 p.m. in the lobby. I'll have the briefcase. You'll signal me when you're ready. That's right. There was a pause. Troy, I have to ask one more time. Are you prepared for what happens after? Marissa is going to be devastated. Evan is going to be humiliated. Your relationship with both of them might never recover. I looked at the invitation sitting on my desk, at the folders full of documents, at the new suit hanging in my closet. I know, I said, but I'm tired of being invisible, Howard. I'm tired of being erased from my own story. I understand. I'll see you Saturday. See you Saturday. I hung up and sat in the quiet house. Tomorrow I'd review the documents one last time. Tomorrow I'd make sure every detail was perfect. But tonight I just sat in the silence and thought about everything that had led to this moment. 58 years of being the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who stepped back and let others shine. That version of Troy Renwick was about to disappear, and I was ready. The morning of May 12th arrived with cloudless skies. I woke at 5 a.m., unable to sleep, my mind already racing through the evening ahead. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table in the dim pre-dawn light, going through my mental checklist one final time. The suit was hanging in my closet, perfectly pressed. The documents were organized in a leather folder on my desk. Howard had confirmed via text at midnight that he had everything ready. All the pieces were in place. At 6 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Marissa. "Good morning, Dad. Big day. Can't wait to see you tonight. Don't forget, event starts at 7, but try to get there by 6:45. Love you." I stared at the message, the casual cheerfulness of it, the complete lack of awareness. I typed back, "I'll be there." No heart emoji, just the facts. I spent the morning keeping busy. I cleaned the kitchen, I vacuumed, I organized tools in the garage for the third time this week. Anything to keep my hands occupied. At noon, I forced myself to eat, a sandwich I barely tasted. My stomach was tight with nerves, but I knew I needed food. At 1 p.m., I showered. I took my time, letting the hot water ease the tension in my shoulders. When I got out, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. 58 years old, gray hair, lines around my eyes, the face of a man who'd worked hard and asked for very little. But tonight, that man was going to speak up. I dried off and got dressed slowly. The dress shirt first, crisp, white, perfectly fitted, the charcoal suit pants, the jacket that hung on my shoulders perfectly, the silk tie, knotted carefully, the leather shoes, polished to a shine. When I was finished, I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. I barely recognized the man staring back. This wasn't the Troy Renwick who fixed fences and stayed quiet. This was someone else, someone who demanded to be seen. I checked my watch. 3:15, still hours to go. I went to my office and opened the leather folder one last time. Bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, the loan guarantee agreement, receipts, 30 years of financial support, all documented. I closed the folder and placed it in a slim briefcase. Then I sat and waited. At 5:30, I got in my car and started driving downtown. The city was busy with Friday evening traffic. I drove slowly, taking surface streets, giving myself time to settle into the calm I'd need. My phone rang. Marissa. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text. "Dad, are you on your way?" I typed back, "On my way." The event hall was in the financial district, surrounded by glass towers. I arrived at 6 p.m. earlier than requested. I wanted time to observe. I parked in a public garage 2 blocks away. I wanted the walk. As I approached the event hall, I could see other people arriving, men in tuxedos, women in evening gowns, everyone polished and professional. I fit right in. The lobby was filling up when I walked through the doors. A massive chandelier hung from the ceiling, round tables with champagne, a string quartet in one corner. I scanned the crowd and spotted Howard near a column, briefcase in hand. He saw me and nodded. I made my way over. "Troy," Howard said quietly, "you clean up well." "Thanks." He gestured to the briefcase. "Everything's here. Multiple copies, all certified. Are you still sure?" I looked toward the main hall. Through the doors, I could see people finding their seats. Tables draped in white, a stage with a podium. "I'm sure," I said. Howard studied me. "All right. What do you need?" "Stay here. When the time comes, I'll signal you." "And if they don't call you up?" "They will. These events always include family. It's part of the performance." Howard nodded. "I'll be ready." I walked to the registration table. "Name?" "Troy Renwick." She handed me a name tag. "Table 14?" I took it, but didn't put it on. I walked into the main hall. It was enormous. 50 tables, high ceilings, banners with the firm's logo. A stage at the front with screens on either side. I walked the perimeter. Table 14 was in the middle. Not the worst spot, but not VIP. I didn't sit. Instead, I found table 3. There they were. Marissa, Evan, and Gareth at the prime table beside the stage. Marissa radiant in her emerald gown. Evan confident in his tuxedo. Gareth at the head of the table like a king. They hadn't seen me. I turned and walked back to the lobby. "They're here," I told Howard. "Front and center." "Nervous?" "A little, but ready." "Remember, facts only, no emotion. Let the truth do the work." I nodded. Then I walked back into the hall and found a seat at the bar. By 6:30, the room was nearly full. The noise was overwhelming. Conversations, laughter, glasses clinking. I watched. At 6:50, a woman in burgundy stepped onto the stage and tested the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats. We'll be starting soon." The crowd settled. I made my way to table 14. People introduced themselves. Evan's colleagues, pleasant, unaware. At 7, the lights dimmed. The woman in burgundy, Michelle, stepped to the microphone. "Good evening, and welcome to the Caldwell and Lyons Annual Achievement Gala." Applause. The performance began. For 40 minutes, I watched. Michelle talked about the firm's values. Awards were given, speeches made, applause followed each one. I sat quietly, watching table 3. Marissa beamed every time Evan's name was mentioned. Gareth whispered to Evan constantly. They looked perfect. At 7:40, Michelle returned to the microphone. "And now, tonight's main recognition. Please join me in celebrating Evan Caldwell, Associate Partner, for his outstanding work on the Hartman acquisition." Applause erupted. Evan stood and headed toward the stage, but Michelle held up a hand. "Before we hear from Evan, we'd like to invite family to the stage, the people who've supported him." My heart pounded. "Gareth Caldwell, father of Evan Caldwell?" Gareth stood, confident, walking to the stage. Loud applause. "Marissa Renwick Caldwell, wife of Evan Caldwell." Marissa stood gracefully. More applause. Michelle looked at her card. "And Troy Renwick, father of Marissa Caldwell." The room went quiet for a beat. Then scattered applause. Every head turned toward me. I stood slowly. I walked down the aisle, my footsteps echoing. The lights were bright, hot. I climbed the steps and took my place beside Marissa. She whispered, "Dad, you look nice." I didn't respond. The stage felt smaller, more exposed, but I was ready. Michelle smiled. "We're so grateful to have family here. Evan, would you like to say a few words?" Evan stepped forward, arm around Marissa. "Absolutely. First, I have to thank my father. Gareth Caldwell taught me everything about business, how to negotiate, how to lead. Dad, you've been my mentor and my biggest supporter." Enthusiastic applause. Gareth nodded proudly. "And my beautiful wife. Marissa has been my rock. When I was working late on Hartman, she was there. She believed in me." More applause. Marissa's eyes glistened. Evan turned to me. His smile was perfunctory now. "And Troy, Marissa's father. Thanks for being here and supporting the family." Polite, thin applause. He started to turn away, but Michelle stopped him. "Actually, Evan, let's give the family members a chance to speak too." Evan's smile flickered. "Oh, sure." Michelle turned to Gareth. "Mr. Caldwell?" Gareth didn't hesitate. He stepped to the microphone like he'd been waiting his whole life. "Thank you, Michelle. Being a father is about teaching values, about showing what leadership means. From the time Evan was a boy, I made sure he understood that success is earned." He paused dramatically. "I opened doors for him, made introductions, shared my wisdom, but more importantly, I showed him how to walk through those doors with confidence, how to command respect, how to build something that lasts." He went on for 5 minutes. Family legacy, strong role models, his investments in Evan's future. Every word positioned himself as the architect of Evan's success. The audience believed it. When he stepped back, the applause was thunderous. Michelle turned to Marissa. "Mrs. Caldwell?" Marissa looked nervous, but stepped forward. "I don't have a big speech. I just want to say how proud I am of Evan. He works harder than anyone. He's brilliant and driven. I feel lucky to be his wife. That's all." Brief, warm applause. Marissa stepped back, glancing at me with an unreadable expression. Then Michelle turned to me. "Mr. Renwick?" The room went silent, all eyes on me. I stepped toward the microphone. I looked out at the crowd. Hundreds of faces staring back at me, expectant, curious. I adjusted the microphone. The screech of feedback cut through the silence. "I'll keep this brief," I said. Evan relaxed slightly beside me. "I've been listening tonight to a lot of talk about support, about family, about who helped Evan get where he is today." I paused. "And I think it's important to make sure we're all clear about what that support actually looked like." Marissa's smile faltered. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it slowly, deliberately, and glanced down at the notes I'd written. "In 2018, I said, my voice steady, Marissa and Evan purchased their first home. The down payment required was $75,000. That money came from a trust I established when Marissa was born, a trust I funded every single month for 30 years. The room was silent now, completely silent. I looked at Marissa. Her eyes were wide. In 2020, I continued, Evan's firm needed capital to expand into new markets. Evan applied for a business loan in the amount of $250,000. The bank required a co-signer with demonstrated financial stability and a strong credit history. I paused. I was that co-signer. Gareth's smile was gone. In 2022, I said, Marissa's car was totaled in an accident. She needed a new one. I paid for it outright, $32,000. I looked back down at my notes. Over the past 10 years, I've also contributed to medical expenses, home repairs, birthday celebrations, holiday gatherings, and various other family needs. The total comes to approximately $547,000. Someone in the audience gasped. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. I didn't do any of this because I wanted recognition, I said. I did it because I believed that's what fathers do. You support your children, you help them build their lives, you step back and let them shine. I looked at Evan. But somewhere along the way, my contributions became invisible. My name was erased from the story, and someone else got credit for the foundation I built. Gareth's face had gone red. I turned to the woman in burgundy. I thought it was important to clarify the record. She looked stunned. Yes, of course. I stepped back from the microphone. The crowd didn't know how to react. There was no applause, just thick, uncomfortable silence. Evan's mouth was opening and closing, but no words were coming out. Marissa had gone pale, and then Gareth found his voice. Now wait just a minute, he said, stepping forward. I think there's been some confusion here about... There's no confusion, I said calmly. I turned toward the edge of the stage and caught Howard's eye. He was already moving, briefcase in hand. He climbed the steps and walked over to me. This is Howard Finch, I said to the audience. He's been my financial advisor and accountant for 15 years. He has documentation of everything I just mentioned. Howard opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. He handed it to the woman in burgundy. She opened it, her eyes scanning the first page. Bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, loan agreements, all with my name, my signature, my account numbers. These are certified copies, Howard said quietly. Bank transfers showing the down payment for the house. The loan co-signing agreement with Troy Renwick listed as the guarantor. Receipt for the vehicle purchase. All legally documented and verified. The woman looked up at Gareth, then at Evan, then back at me. Evan finally found his voice. Dad, I didn't know. You didn't ask, I said. Marissa's eyes were filled with tears. Dad, I never meant to. I know, I said, but intention doesn't change what happened. I looked out at the audience again, at all those faces, at the phones that had been pulled out, recording everything. I spent years believing that quiet support was noble, I said, that stepping back and staying silent was the right thing to do, that love meant letting other people take credit. I paused. But silence isn't humility. It's erasure, and I'm done being erased. I turned back to Evan. You've worked hard, I said. I don't doubt that. But your success didn't happen in a vacuum. It didn't happen because you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. It happened because I gave you the boots. The room was absolutely still. I looked at Gareth. And it certainly didn't happen because of him. Gareth looked like he wanted to argue, but Howard was already handing more documents to the woman on stage. Tax returns, investment statements, trust documents. Every single one showed exactly where the money had come from, and Gareth's name wasn't on any of them. I stepped away from the microphone and walked to the edge of the stage. Behind me, I could hear voices starting to overlap, questions being shouted, the woman in burgundy trying to regain control of the event. But I didn't look back. I walked down the steps, through the crowd, past table 14, past the bar, past the photographer who was still holding up his camera, capturing everything. Howard was right behind me. That was something, he said quietly as we reached the lobby. I nodded. What now? He asked. I looked back toward the main hall. Through the doors, I could see the chaos I'd left behind. Evan standing frozen on stage, Marissa covering her face with her hands, Gareth gesturing angrily at the woman in burgundy. People were standing now, talking, pointing. Phones were everywhere, recording, photographing, documenting. The truth was out. Now, I said, they know. I walked out into the cool night air. The city lights reflected off the glass towers around me. Traffic moved past on the street. Somewhere, a siren wailed. I got in my car and drove home. The streets were quiet. The radio stayed off. I drove in silence, feeling lighter than I had in years. When I got home, I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat in the dark living room, letting the weight of what I'd done settle over me. My phone started buzzing, messages flooding in, calls I wasn't going to answer. I turned it off and set it on the coffee table. Tomorrow, there would be consequences, conversations I'd have to have, relationships that might never recover, but tonight I'd done what I needed to do. I'd taken back my story, I'd made myself visible. And for the first time in years, I felt like I mattered.